Hi, I'm Pam Fox at pamfox.org. Welcome, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about what causes GERD and why we have a weak LES. And the reason I say weak is because for many of us who are diagnosed with GERD, we're told that our LES, or our lower esophageal sphincter, is weak, or it's misfunctioning, or it's damaged. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that. And I like to actually refer to the LES, excuse me, not so much as being weak, but not performing its job optimally. And I'm going to be talking about why that is in this video. I'm going to be talking about the top 3 ways, in fact, why that is. And so just to be clear, so to start out, when you're diagnosed with gastroesophageal reflux disorder, that is simply where the contents of the stomach are rising up. So if you imagine this to be your stomach and this to be the esophagus, the food comes down and empties into the stomach. And where those two meet, there's a valve known as the lower esophageal sphincter, or the LES. And that valve, it's a one-way valve where the food is allowed to enter into the stomach, but it's not supposed to be allowed to enter back out of the stomach. So the job of that sphincter is to keep the contents in the stomach, okay? And there are some exceptions to this. One is if we're poisoned, like if we have alcohol poisoning or food poisoning, salmonella, E. coli, something like that, the body knows. The body knows it's in danger. It always wants to protect the body so that it can thrive and survive, and so that lower esophageal sphincter will open up and allow that poison out in the form of vomiting. Also, if there's a buildup of gas within the stomach or trapped gas, that valve will open up and allow the release of the gas in the form of a burp. And then in the case of reflux, that valve will open up and allow the contents to rise up or to regurgitate in the form of vomiting or regurgitation or burping, or just the rising of the acid leaking up into the esophagus. So, so what I want to talk about today are the top 3 reasons that lower esophageal sphincter will open up and allow reflux. So the number one thing that if you're newly diagnosed to this, you may not have heard it, but that is this idea that you have what we call low stomach acid, or hypochlorhydria. And basically the idea behind this is simply that as we get older, and then usually you'll see many more cases of GERD in older people than in younger people. But as we get older, our bodies just develop a little bit less and a little bit less stomach acid, or the hypochloric acid within the stomach, the digestive juices that digest our food and that sterilize our food and that kill dangerous microbes that are dangerous toward our health and our survival. So it's really important that we have strong stomach acid for those reasons. And as we get older, if we begin to have a weaker stomach acid, a couple of things can happen. One is obviously our food isn't getting thoroughly digested, which means we can become nutrient deficient. Another is, as I just said, if we don't have a really healthy balance of bacteria within the gut, and if we have a low stomach acid, then dangerous microbes and bacteria can begin to thrive within the digestive system. And that can cause a lot of threats to your health and your life as well. Also, with low stomach acid, the lower esophageal sphincter, again, this valve where the esophagus meets the stomach, that valve, like I said before, its job is to clamp down tight to keep the contents in the stomach. So in the presence of strong hydrochloric acid, that valve clamps down very tight. It clamps down very tight because it knows that that's acid in the stomach. That's acid. And so because there is acid in the stomach, the body doesn't want that acid to be able to rise up and burn the sensitive tissues of the esophagus like it does with heartburn. And so its job is to clamp down tight in the presence. The stronger the stomach acid, the tighter it will clamp down. And so the reason that this reflux, the reason that LES will open up and allow that reflux when there's a weak hydrochloric acid is simply that your body is developing a weaker or lesser hydrochloric acid, and so that valve doesn't know that it needs to clamp down tight. because it doesn't have that signaling of the strong acid being present. And so with this, there are a number of things that you can do to stimulate your body's own production of hydrochloric acid. You can supplement with hydrochloric acid. You can eat things like vinegars, lemon waters, sauerkraut, fermented foods, these kinds of things, and they all help stimulate your body's own production of hydrochloric acid. So for some people, something simple like, taking apple cider vinegar every day is very, very helpful. But it's not going to be helpful for everybody. And I do want to strongly warn you that when it comes to trying these methods as a therapy, especially supplementation with hydrochloric acid supplements, you want to be very careful, and it's best advised to do it under the supervision of your doctor. And that's because if you start to take, let's say you're on a proton pump inhibitor, which is a drug that will decrease your stomach acid. That's what it does. It will decrease or inhibit your stomach acid. And now you're taking a supplement that increases your stomach acid. That's not going to make a whole lot of sense. If you have ulcers, and this is really, really important, if you have stomach ulcers and you start to supplement with hydrochloric acid, those stomach ulcers are holes in your stomach where you can bleed internally. And so then if you begin to supplement with hydrochloric acid, you could bleed to death internally. So you want to be really, really careful when you start to investigate these things. But this is one reason that for many people that their lower esophageal sphincter is not clamping down tight and keeping those contents in the stomach where they belong. All right, so the number 2 reason that we can have a weak LES, or our LES is not functioning optimally is inflammation, internal inflammation. And so what is inflammation? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Inflammation is a life-saving mechanism. Inflammation is the body's response to injury. It's the response to damage. So we all know that if we have an external injury, maybe we cut our finger, we might have a little bit of swelling and redness there, and that's because the body is flooding that area with what's needed to begin the healing process, inflammation. Okay, so inflammation is a very good thing. So then why do we talk about it like it's a bad thing? Why do we talk about it like we need to reduce inflammation? Well, because we do. When we have long-term ongoing inflammation, that means that whatever that injury is, it's not healing. It means most likely it's getting repetitively injured over and over again. And so we have ongoing, repetitive, long-term inflammation, which is known as chronic inflammation. And so when it comes to internal inflammation, so if you think of any of the digestive disorders, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, IBS, IBD, SIBO, H. pylori, esophagitis, gastritis, any of these digestive conditions, and there are many, we have inflammation in all of those conditions. Why? Because the digestive system is injured. It's injured. And so what happens when we have inflammation in terms of our lower esophageal sphincter? Well, if you imagine any tissues internally and you imagine them being swollen and inflamed, it becomes clear that those tissues, whatever the case may be, are going to be less able to do their job properly. And so if you think of a valve, a little valve where the food is allowed to come in, but it's supposed to clamp down tight and not allowed to come out. And now you imagine those tissues are swollen and tender and injured. It's not going to be able to do its job optimally, okay? And so then the question then becomes, well, what causes this inflammation and what causes these injuries? What causes these internal digestive system injuries? And the number one thing is what we eat and what we drink. It's what we put in our body. And this is what we really need to make the connection with, is that we have a lifetime of eating, certain foods. We might change our diet a little bit throughout our life, but, if you were accustomed to eating, certain foods your whole life, there comes this breaking point where the system can no longer tolerate it and it becomes injured, okay? And so if you're eating a lot of highly processed foods, a lot of junk foods, you oftentimes hear of, acidic foods are causing your GERD and your reflux. And while that tends to be true, it's not necessarily, the fact that they are acidic is what's causing the problem. And that's the myth and the misunderstanding that I think a lot of people make, that we have acid reflux because of too much acid because we're eating so many acidic foods. Well, if you look at like the top acidic foods, yeah, they're highly processed foods, junk foods, meat, dairy, and eggs, alcohol, cigarettes, you know, soda pop. These are your highly acidic foods, and these are oftentimes your trigger foods. But some of the healthier foods can be trigger foods as well, like citrus and tomato or spices. And so you have to make this connection that a lifetime of eating, you know, junk foods is going to eventually cause injury to your digestive tract. It's going to eventually cause those injuries, which means you're going to have inflammation. And once that inflammation exists and you have ongoing chronic inflammation, you continue to injure that system every time you eat, every time you drink a pop, every time you eat a donut or whatever it is that's causing those injuries, then you're repetitively injuring the system, which means the swelling can't go down and the healing cannot take place, which means you continue to be sick and you continue to have pain and discomfort, you know, symptoms. Yikes. I have a virus on my computer. It's going nuts over here. So let me just recollect my train of thought. So inflammation. So really it comes down to when it comes to internal digestive system inflammation and all of the many conditions and disorders and diseases of the digestive tract, it comes down to, you know, diet. It comes down to diet in most cases. And so really you just have to, you know, change your diet, eat a healthier diet, and allow that healing to take place within your digestive tract. And this isn't always easy. It depends on how sick you are, how many conditions you are, how long you've been sick. For some people, simply eating, you know, more vegetables and cutting out something like alcohol or soda pop might be all it takes. And for others, they may have to, you know, it may take months or even years to begin to really experience feeling good and healing of the digestive system. So, you know, if you've got imbalances of the bacteria, or if there's a bacterial overgrowth of some type, or an infection, internal infection, healing can be much more stubborn and take a lot more time. So, but you've got to take a look at the food. So that's number 2 is inflammation. And then the third thing is, my specialty is hiatal hernias, or I like to lump in hiatal hernias and pre-hiatal hernias, which is just a term I started using recently, because when it comes to hiatal hernia, some people go to the trouble of having the endoscopy or having the barium swallow, and they get a diagnosis of no hiatal hernia, and yet they still have all the symptoms of hiatal hernia. And this is because we can have what I call a pre-hiatal hernia, which is just, you know, your stomach, when it herniates through your diaphragm. If this is your stomach and this is your diaphragm, when in the case of a hiatal hernia, your stomach is obstructing the diaphragm and it's lodged or sliding in and out of your diaphragm. And so this doesn't usually just happen like within a moment or overnight. It's usually a lifetime of pressure, or pressure over a long period of time, like for example, like during a pregnancy, or maybe if you have an occupation where you're bent over a lot, you know. I don't know if you guys saw me interview Dr. Cliff Higgins. He's a dentist, and he's had all of these issues, and he believes it's because he's, you know, hunching over his patients day in and day out for years. And so that puts pressure, it pushes your stomach up. And so when, in the case of a prehiatal hernia, your stomach can be pressed against your diaphragm, not necessarily through it. You're still going to have pressure on your diaphragm, pressure on your stomach, and pressure on all of those nerves on the stomach, and pressure on your lower esophageal sphincter. So you can have similar symptoms without actually even having that hernia. And if you're having, if you know you have no hiatal hernia and yet you still have these symptoms, it may just be a matter of time for that stomach to herniate through the diaphragm. And then it's much more difficult to reverse this condition once it's through the diaphragm, because you have to get it dislodged in order to reverse it. And then you've got to strengthen that hiatus, that hole that it's coming through. And you need to know how to do this with very specific, what I call hiatal hernia specific breathing exercises in order to strengthen and tighten that hiatus without further herniating your hernia. So in the case of hiatal hernia, again, the stomach is obstructed or protruding through the diaphragm. And so when this happens, as far as the lower esophageal sphincter is concerned, again, you've got your stomach, you've got your esophagus, you've got your lower esophageal sphincter here. So now imagine, I've got some props here. Now imagine, so if you imagine this balloon is your stomach and a portion of it is now obstructed into your diaphragm, pushing up into the thoracic cavity, up into your chest cavity, and you've got this wrapped around your stomach. And your lower esophageal sphincter is up here, and now you've got additional pressure on that lower esophageal sphincter. So now with this up in the chest cavity, you've got pressure on that sphincter because it can be pressing up against many different organs, whether it be your lungs or your heart, your ribs. And when, a lot of people complain about a lot of pain when it comes to hiatal hernia, and all you have to do is look at this balloon and imagine your stomach. Try to picture your stomach essentially with a belt wrapped around it because it's lodged in your hiatus. Your stomach is meant to hang down here freely and expand. When we eat, it's got stretch receptors. It's meant to expand. And you've got a belt essentially wrapped around that stomach, and you've got an obstruction in your diaphragm. And so because of those things, the tissues are all going to be tender and injured, and you're going to have pain and discomfort, and it's going to hurt underneath the rib cage, usually on the left side, just underneath the rib cage, or closer to the middle by the sternum. And everybody's hiatal hernia is a little bit different, but and then with all of those nerves radiating out from the vagus nerve, if it's pinched, if you have a pinched nerve, for some people their stomach gets pushed up into the diaphragm. That can pinch a nerve. Their stomach can get folded up. It can get twisted. And all of these things can put pressure on the nerves. So then we start talking about a whole longer list of symptoms that can occur when we start talking about a pinched nerve. So when it comes to hiatal hernia, what can we do then? Well, typically doctors, and a lot of you can relate to what I'm about to say, typically doctors will say, oh, it's hiatal hernia, it shouldn't cause you much trouble. And yet we suffer. We have all of these symptoms. We're in pain. We have maybe indigestion and vomiting and nausea and constant belching and heartburn and all of these different things. And we're told we have this hiatal hernia, but it shouldn't cause any trouble. And so then a conventional doctor, what they're trained to do then, if you have, let's say, heartburn, for example, is what they're trained to do, what their protocol is, their conventional protocol is to write you a prescription. They might, tell you to make some changes in your diets to avoid certain trigger foods, elevate the head of your bed, and these different things first, and then they'll put you on a drug. Because if you've got acid rising up again into your esophagus, that's burning and damaging and injuring those tissues, and we don't want that either. And so that's the protocol, is to weaken and inhibit that acid so that it's going to be less acidic, less likely to burn and injure the tender tissues. And so what I want to offer is an alternative to that, and that is natural healing. That is getting to the root of the cause and essentially, reversing that hernia. So if you have a hernia, again, either a pre-hernia where the stomach is pushed against the diaphragm or through the diaphragm, the answer to eliminating those symptoms is to get that stomach out of that herniated position. Okay, then everything can begin to heal. Foundationally, you may need to change your diet. If you know your diet's not healthy, then yeah, you'll need to change your diet. And I'm not here to say you need to change your diet. I think you should if you've got a crappy diet, but the message that I'm always trying to relay to folks is that a healthy diet can be extremely enjoyable. It doesn't have to be, we get this mindset that it's going to be a sacrifice and that it's going to be, we're going to have to give up something we really, really love. And while that may be true in a sense, we can replace it with foods that are just as delicious or more delicious than what we were eating before, which means, yeah, we may have to learn how to cook in a different way and shop in a different way and eat and order out in a different way and all of that. But I'm here to send a message of hope that eating a healthy, and I recommend a whole foods plant-based diet, is extremely enjoyable, and for a number of reasons. Not only because, you know, you begin to feel better, but I know for me, going on a whole foods plant-based diet has transformed my life in numerous ways. So try not to look at it as being this extreme diet where you're gonna, you know, that you could never ever possibly adhere to. Any diet that is extremely enjoyable is going to be easy to adhere to because you love the food that you're eating. And so I'm here to tell you that a whole foods plant-based diet can be extremely enjoyable. And if you don't believe me, just go online and Google pictures of vegan food or whole plant foods, and you know, there's people all over Instagram and YouTube and Facebook, you know, taking pictures and posting pictures of their food. The food is amazing. So yes, you may need to change your diet and eat healthier and eliminate some of these foods that are causing the internal injuries in the first place, so that inflammation can come down. The inflammation has to come down in order for healing to take place. That's what healing is. Okay, and so then as far as a hiatal hernia, that's a very mechanical or anatomical situation. So even if you're eating the healthiest diet in the world, you could still have that stomach lodged up into the diaphragm, and this can be because of years of the stomach being pushed up and through the diaphragm, and then it will begin to recreate new adhesions, and so it can be difficult to get that stomach to come down. But it is very possible. I have done it on myself, and I've helped numerous other people do it with very, very simple exercises. So you guys, that's it for today. I hope you found this helpful. If you'd like more information, you can follow me. You can like my page here on Facebook. You can go over and hit the follow button on my Facebook profile. I'm going to be doing live streams more often here from my fan page, so go ahead and like this page, and then you'll be notified when I go live for more content in healing in natural and effective ways, or you can go over to my website, pamfox.org, to learn more. All right, thanks for watching.